We live in fast-changing times. Innovation matters more than ever. So as a leading business school, we want to be kind of close to the action. We want to have a profound impact on the way that the world does business, and indeed on how business impacts the world. We had an epiphany a couple of years back. We said to ourselves, look, there's lots of companies, there's lots of organizations offer these sort of innovation awards, but they're not very innovative. Why not create an innovation award which reflects the reality of the messy process of innovation?
I think the Real Innovation Awards are truly important because they're about success on the ground. So much that's written from business schools and academia is very theoretical and very high level, and the reality is innovation is much tougher than that. So it's great that it's real innovation that's celebrated tonight.
We usually get prize for sort of the technology or the design, but I think this is a special award for us because it has to do with the story of the company.
I think what's great about the Real Innovation Awards is it recognises there can be no rule book.
It's incredible to be recognised for something that initially was a failure, where that failure helped get a new business set up that is now going from strength to strength.
Real innovation happens at every level of business, right from the sole trader up to the multinational.
My advice to innovators, they always have to be systematic, they have to be persistent, consistent, and never give up. And of course, you have to believe in your product. If you don't believe in your product, no one else would.
I think my one piece of advice for an innovator would be not to listen to the really strong answers that say no. As long as there's a few people in the industry you're working who support your idea, that would be enough to bring your idea to fruition.
It takes a lot to innovate. It's a lot of thick skin. You have to take a lot of no's for an answer, and you have to be able to move forward with it.
You really want to bring together a bunch of people with diverse disciplines. Oftentimes you don't know which person or which discipline can solve a problem. That whole thing about diversity and inclusion should extend beyond race, creed, color, and everything, and go to disciplines when you start talking about science and technology.
So my one piece of advice for an innovator would be brave, be passionate, believe in what you're doing, and don't be afraid of change. Keep going.
Take a risk. Innovating is peculiar. You try so many different things, the majority of them won't work. But what happens when you try a lot of many things, something is bound to hit the pivot point. Just go for it.
We are in a never-ending revolution, because if we stop ourselves, we die. Companies who stop innovating, they die. So we must always change.
For us, it's about real innovation in the face of crisis, and innovating, first of all, to survive, and then innovating to thrive.
Welcome, everybody, to the 2020 Real Innovation Awards. I'm Julian Birkinshaw, Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship here at London Business School, and I'm the co-founder of these awards along with my colleague, Jeff Skinner. As we're just getting started and still people are coming along, please feel free just to type into chat where you're coming from, what city, what country, and maybe something about what interests you about the world of innovation. And we'll just watch those as they come in, but I'm going to get started. The awards is going to be about an hour or so long. We're going to have some very interesting live conversations with some of the winners, and Jeff and I are going to be sharing our thoughts and reflections. So let me just give you a word of introduction. When we introduced these awards 5 years ago, we based it on the simple notion that while there were plenty of other innovation awards out there, most of them were really not very innovative at all. I was just looking online at a recent innovation award from BCG, the consulting company, and they ranked Apple, Alphabet, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft as the most innovative companies in the world. And it just so happens that those are also the 4 most valuable companies in the world by market cap. So clearly there's something there which is not really very useful, because the reality is that innovation is actually much more than business success. It's messy, it's unpredictable, it involves serendipity and failure. It's as much about the people behind the innovation as it is about the products or services created. So we have come up with our own version of the world of innovation. And I'm going to just share with you, as a taster for what's to come over the next hour, the 6 award categories that we are using. Each of them has a story. Each of them has some fascinating examples, some finalists, and ultimately a winner in each category. And what we're going to be doing today is actually sharing some of those stories with you. Before I hand over to Jeff to tell you a little bit about how we actually chose the winners, we've got a little poll question or two, which we're going to use to get you thinking and to get you involved. So Eva, if you could launch the first poll for us. I think most of you will know the score right now in Zoom. We're going to ask you a little question. It's going to come up on the screen and you're going to share your thoughts. How do you perceive the opportunities for innovation in your industry sector right now? Many exciting opportunities, some good opportunities, a few opportunities, or no opportunities at all. We're going to wait for about 10 or 20 seconds, and we're just going to see what you have to say on this issue. I'm not going to wait for absolutely everybody, but we're just going to get at least half of the audience voting. Okay, and I'm going to close the poll now. And the answer is, guess what? Many exciting opportunities. I'm so glad that that was the answer that came out top, because first of all, it makes this whole awards thing a little bit more worthwhile because we can all see opportunities. It also tells us a little bit of something about you as an audience. You are motivated, you are excited. Many of you hopefully are actually entrepreneurs. So Eva, let's get the second question just to get things going. What, if anything, is holding you back from pursuing these opportunities that most of you have said you've got? You don't have the resources, you're risk averse, you're happy in your job, you haven't come up with the right idea yet. Nothing is holding you back. So again, we're just going to give you a few seconds to share your thoughts. And again, I'm just going to stop now that we've got about 3/4 of you having given us your answers, and we're going to stop right there. And the answer is, well, actually, there's 3 things more or less in a dead heat. I haven't come up with the right idea yet is marginally ahead of nothing is holding me back. I'm already working on it, glad to hear it. And there's a big chunk of you at 28% who don't have the necessary resources or support. And that is a very common syndrome. So I'm glad we've got a mixture of entrepreneurs, would-be entrepreneurs, and perhaps a few frustrated entrepreneurs as well. So thank you for all that. Jeff, I'm going to give you the floor now. I wouldn't mind if you could just give us your thoughts on how we put the whole judging process in place.
Okay, well, so I'm going to give a few words on how the how the winners were nominated as well as selected. And this year we received about 400 nominations. Many came from LBS students who we, of course, endlessly encourage to think about businesses and individuals that they admire for having innovated in some way or another. There then follows multiple shortlisting rounds, whittling down the nominations first to 15 and then to 5 in each of the 6 categories. And only then do we contact the 30 who made it to ask their permission or ask rather whether they'd like to accept the nomination, which they nearly always do enthusiastically. We got 2 awards for each category. First is the People's Choice, which is an open voting system that ran earlier in the autumn. These winners already know who they are, already known, and we'll mention them again, of course, this afternoon. The other awards, and the ones we focus on today, are selected by an invited jury of experts and past winners who are now being displayed. So thank you to all of you for putting your time in. More thank yous later. So in a few moments, we'll ask Julian back to start us off. For each category, we're going to display the shortlisted nominees and announce the 2 winners. And as Julian said, we'll ask the judge's choice winner to say a few words, which will either be a live clip from a conversation we had with them earlier in the week with great enjoyment, or or live in 2 cases. So we'll end with a few thoughts from London Business School faculty on innovation in times of COVID, and then to finish, a fireside chat with the winners of this year's brand new category, Innovation in Adversity. But more of that anon. Julian.
Thank you very much.
Fleming.
Good. And before we get moving, you see the bottom right of the screen, hashtag Real Innovation Awards. That is the hashtag you should be using if you're tweeting. And of course, we would encourage you to do so. So without further ado, we are going to move into our first category, the Alexander Fleming Serendipity Award for the most inspiring story of unexpected luck and random connections leading to successful outcomes. You may have read about the famous Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which of course recently received tentative approval. They've certainly got the results out there, 90% efficacy, they said, if you actually give people a half a dose first and then you follow it up with a full dose later. Do you know why they tried the half a dose first thing and then a full dose later? It was a mistake. They were very, very happy to admit that they got it wrong and that actually increased the efficacy of this drug. So serendipity happens all the time. I'm going to share with you on the screen the top 5, the finalists. I'm not going to tell you the story of each of those. If you'd like to go to our website, you will find little stories on each of them. I can share with you that the People's Choice winner, which as Jeff said, was the one which received the most nominations or votes from the crowd, was Swiss Vault. And Swiss Vault is a company with a modular hospital data storage system. Again, you can read much more about that later if you'd like. But the story that is perhaps more in focus today is the choice made by the judges. And the winner is a company called Instabug. In their last year at Cairo University in Egypt, Omar Gaba and Motaz Solomon built a social media app, and they needed a platform to test it. And not being able to find a suitable one, they built their own, as you do if you're a software engineer. After graduating in 2012, they launched Instabug. It's an app testing website that leverages crowdsourcing to get feedback from users. Unfortunately, the response was negative. People hated it. In fact, in Omar's word, they really hated the product. But there was one feature that they liked. When a fault was found, they built this feature whereby the user shakes their phone, often in frustration because the thing isn't working. And the shaking actually opens up an instant feedback form, which then allows you immediately to type in what it is that you don't like about that particular thing. So Omar and Motaz, when they realized that people really liked that feature, they pivoted from their original idea to a simple in-app tool that enables developers to get feedback from users. It took off like a tiger beetle, the fastest bug in the world, by the way. And now it has a user base of more than 2 billion individuals and organizations. And it's allowed them to attract something like $5 million in Series A funding earlier this year. Omar could not be here today, unfortunately, but we talked to him just literally last week. And I want to show you just one clip for the interview, just a 45-second clip, when I asked him for his thoughts on how to go about doing innovation in these troubled times.
Obviously, this year has been a very unfortunate year to the words, and I think one of the important things that founders are thinking about is noticing different trends. When you notice that most people are actually working from home, there's a lot of businesses that would be built around that. When you're thinking that at one point in the future, people would be coming back, the future of work is different. So I think one of the pretty important things that founders need to focus now on the new trends and new habits and the new normal that's actually happening in the world, and kind of build the future and anticipate the future and build products that would cater for these kind of things.
Jeff, over to you.
Okay, so we're on to the next category, which is the Best Beats First Award. I seem to remember when we introduced these awards, we actually called it the Fast Follower Award, but there were a surprising number of companies who we wanted to turn into finalists who didn't like the word fast follower. So we recreated it as a Best Beats First Award, and then it became far more popular. But it is essentially the same thing. These are companies that have not necessarily the first to market, but perhaps by learning from who was first or by understanding user needs better, introduce a product subsequently which dominates in a way that nobody ever thought it ever could. Now, this year's People Choice winner in the Best Beats First category is Trinidad and Tobago-based Term Finance Holding, whose entirely virtual credit and loans operation disperses over 1,000 loans every month. So well done there. And then on to the judge's choice. And for sheer ingenuity, the judge's choice goes to Duolingo. Now, in 2011, the online language learning space was rather profitable in terms of gross margin, with an oligopoly of incumbents often charging hundreds of dollars for content. Rosetta Stone, founded in 1992, dominated the market. Our Duolingo founders, Louis von Ahn and Severin Hacker, completely disrupted the sector by building an innovative language learning platform. To begin with, language learners translated the contents from a new language into the learner's native language. In contrast to the existing products, the users were the product, and Duolingo, the clever platform that assembled and shared the translations. From the outset, the purpose was to give equal access to language training and thereby eliminate a major cause of inequality across the globe. The founders also wanted learning languages to be fun. In so doing, they tapped into a whole new type of user, vastly expanding the number of learners and languages. The platform's entirely free. Bill Gates gets the same content as you, me, or any user in an emerging economy. Because of this, Duolingo has to find different revenue models. They launched an ad-based freemium model and add-on services to organizations. For example, the Duolingo English test, which enables users to take university language entrance exams digitally. In 2019, just 6 years after launch, Duolingo secured a 1.5 billion Series F round that not only made it a unicorn, but gave it a valuation more than 3 times that of Rosetta Stone, whose user base it now dwarfs by many millions of subscribers. By no means the first, Duolingo has proved to be best at breaking the language barrier in more ways than one. And joining us live this afternoon is Colin Watkins, UK General Manager of Duolingo. Fantastic you're able to join us today.
Yes, and thank you for the invite. Unfortunately, Luis couldn't be here today, so I'm stepping in. So thanks for the invite. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, we've got another assignment in mind for Louis, so we'll get to him far again. Now, look, Duolingo's often credited with outwitting Rosetta, but really, the more I read, I mean, these are two different products aimed at two different populations with differing motivations and means.
Exactly. The sort of like principle behind Duolingo is to make language learning and learning more broadly universally accessible, which is why the product is free. It will always be free. As you mentioned there, that Khloe Kardashian and Bill Gates have the same French course as somebody in Syria, or I'm seeing some of the places that people are tuning in from today. You know, wherever you are, you will have the same French course. And that's fundamentally what we're about. It's making language learning accessible. When you come on to, you know, like where we are with competitors and how the market has changed, I think what's been really interesting for us in the last few years, and this was principally from when we launched the app. So there was a desktop product first that we had, but then when we launched the app, things went gangbusters. Things really, really took off because it was the ability to have that device in your hand and start learning a language wherever you were at whatever time. Pretty much, you know, you could be in the bath or on the loo or wherever it was.
I mean, I've got to ask, why do people learn languages? And what's changed during COVID?
COVID's been a real eye-opener. So why do people learn languages? So it depends where you're from. If you're from the developing world, it's principally English for economic advancement. If you're from the developed world, it's pretty much for motivations like travel or culture or family and relationships and love. But then what we've seen during COVID is that there's been an explosion. Technology culture have all coalesced together. So where you're locked down at home, you pick up your phone, you can start learning Latin, you can start learning Scots Gaelic, you can start learning German. You know, we have 40 languages, all available for free. And people are now using that time. They want a productive use of their time to do something that brings meaning to their life and that does something that betters them as individuals. Like
well, look, Colin, we could talk for ages. I mean, we spoke yesterday about saving endangered indigenous languages. That intrigued me. But we must suppose what comes across so clearly is your enthusiasm for the Duolingo purpose, and that's what the judges love too. A business that somehow managed to combine huge social impact with profit. So thank you very much. Love talking to you. Cheers. And Julian, over to you for the George Bernard Shaw Award.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. Very good. So the George Bernard Shaw Unreasonable Person Award. You may have heard this famous quote from George Bernard Shaw, essentially saying that if we want progress in society, we need people to be a little bit more unreasonable, by which we mean they're trying to change the world and trying to adapt everybody else to their point of view. It turns out that this is a very popular category. Nobody actually minds at all about being called unreasonable. And what you see on the screen now is a list of all of the finalists. We actually had 6 finalists for this one for various reasons I won't bother to explain because it's a very popular category. And again, the stories of each of them are available if you are interested. Let me just acknowledge the People's Choice winner, which is Abbas Dayek, founder of the Nigerian home delivery company Oya Now. And that was available as information before, but what we're going to announce for the first time tonight is that the Judge's Choice winner is Tomolola Adejana, CEO and co-founder of Bankly. Let me just provide a little intro before we interview Tomolola. She founded Bankly in 2018 to provide a digital financial services platform for Nigeria's unbanked small businesses and casual workers. In encounter after encounter, she experienced profound cynicism from the banks, the regulators, and so forth to get on board with her idea. But of course, she persevered. That's the whole point of this award, through rejection after rejection, and used misogyny and cynicism to spur herself on, eventually taking Bankly live in July last year. The platform quickly attracted great interest from supporters, investors, accelerators, and the like. And now she has realistic ambitions to access nearly 3% of a $3 billion plus market in 5 years, making her a truly worthy winner of this award. Tomolola, thanks for joining us. Very good of you to be with us. I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, what impressed me the most about your story is essentially your boldness, your tenacity, call it whatever you like. Tell us what inspired you to create Bankly in the first place. What is it that drove you to do something which was so unreasonable?
So Bankly was created out of a need that I found in my environment, and particularly while right after my MBA, I joined as a founding team this startup that was working to provide micro lending to the informal sector. We're talking traders, we're talking artisans and market women. Typically, these people need loans of just about $10 to about $50, and they have no access to these things. And because of challenges with cash and challenges with data, challenges with cash digitization, their inability to convert cash into its digital form, the formal banks or the formal institutions are unable to digitize their savings or even provide them the necessary support to bring them to kind of increase their productivity or to be able to bring them out of poverty because they are not able to increase their productivity or increase their market share for the business they do. So finding that, I think we just realized that if we can help create this identity, digitize their savings, we will be able to connect them to formal institutions, and then there will be data for these formal institutions to give them the required loans, and they would not be stuck with the predatory loans of loan sharks. So
Got
that's
it. And just give us one example, if you would, of one of the, you told me several of these stories of some of the opposition you faced, some of the challenges you faced, and how you overcame it.
Yeah, there were a lot. I think the fintech or the financial institution space in Nigeria is very dominated by men. And also, I think I dealt with a lot of sexism. I dealt with a lot of ageism. And most particularly, I remember was a meeting I had with more like a telco, or should I say, of vast provider. Vast provider are people that give a USSD that is necessary to connect without the internet to the target segment. Now, walking into this meeting with my CTO. Now, my CTO was a man with 2 kids. He was grown up and he was also male. And walking into this meeting, we were having a meeting with like 3 men, and it was going well. And suddenly there was a point where I had to whip out my business card. And the minute they realized that I was not just his assistant, or I was not his the operations officer, and I was the CEO, there was a laughter, like a snicker. And I wondered what was, but I just didn't want to assume. I wanted to be as neutral as possible. So right after the meeting, they said, one of them said, do you know what you're getting into? I said, excuse me. I said, are you sure you know what you're doing? And I said, I believe I am, because obviously I'm here. And then as we worked out of the meeting, I said to my CTO, was it just me, or there was something? He said to me, that wasn't just you. That was blatant. There was a blatant rudeness because you were the minute they found the card. And I say, it's interesting to know that I don't know much about the company again, and we've gone on to actually build out a 15,000 agent network, and we are currently doing transactions in excess of 500,000 monthly. But and we've been able to get the right investors to join us on this journey. But it started with a lot of no's from all of the required people who needed to partner with us.
Perfect. Well, thank you. It's a really inspiring story, and you have been absolutely unreasonable, but of course in a very reasonable way. So I wish you every success with this business. And we're now going to move on to the next category. Jeff, over to you.
So the next category, harnessing the winds of change. And whenever I'm looking at the nominations for this category, I'm really looking for organizations and individuals, teams who didn't just spot one wind of change, but spotted a number of trends all going on at the same time and found the sweet spot, the future sweet spot, right in the middle of them. They identified a number and really predicted what this might mean for the future, and then got in there well ahead of the curve. So the Harnessing the Winds of Change category, the people's choice this year is Avatar Me, for the wonderful augmented reality technology that they've created, converting photos and videos into 3D product discovery experiences. So well done to them, well mentioned. And then the judge's choice this year is Lemonade Insurance. First brought to me by my daughter, who raved about it, and then up it pops as a nomination. Lemonade clearly has turned the traditional insurance model upside down by allowing customers to pool insurance premium with other customers in groups. It takes a flat fee and then pays claims super fast, donating any excess to the charity nominated by the users. That really is harnessing the winds of change in 2 very different ways. From a tech point of view, by leveraging big data and artificial intelligence to replace underwriters and brokers. And in terms of the greater good, it's finding a way to co-opt insurance for a social cause. Given that, as we'll hear, neither of its 2 founders, Shai Wininger and Daniel Schreiber, had any previous experience in insurance. It's extraordinary to see that the company raised 300 million funding this year, becoming a fintech unicorn with a valuation of 2 billion. That was on the back of gaining 57 million in revenue and more than 425,000 customers in 2 years, making it the stickiest of brands. Maybe that's why they call it Lemonade Insurance. Maybe not. Anyway, I spoke earlier this week to Yael Wisner-Levy, the VP Comms at Lemonade Insurance, who explained, I asked her about the origins of this remarkable business. Here's a short clip of our conversation.
The founders of Lemonade are Shai Winninger and Daniel Schreiber, two kind of veterans of the tech industry who knew absolutely nothing about insurance. And it's kind of precisely that outlier, kind of out of the box thinking, I think, that really led them to found Lemonade. Sometimes when you're too confined within something, when you know too much of a certain subject, it actually confines your thinking. And when you look at it from a different perspective, and Lemonade is certainly kind of a product of looking at a very outdated, a very unloved industry from a very tech perspective, you suddenly think of things that no one else within could have probably thought of or could have thought that was possible. So both Daniel and Shai came together through one of a good friend of theirs who is an investor in the company, Aleph, Michael Eisenberg, and they were introduced to each other precisely because they were looking for their next big thing. And when they looked at a bunch of different industries, and when they got to insurance, they stopped. It was kind of like they had found their destination. It was an industry that, as I said, was so unchanged. It had gone and ignored every revolution since maybe the Industrial Revolution. It was very much unspoiled by innovation. It was very much unloved. I mean, think of yourselves and try to think, how much do you love your insurance company? Is that even a word that you would use together in the same sentence with your insurance company? And the vastness of the industry, the amount, there are 12 insurance companies in the Fortune 100. That is a lot of money running around. And you realize that the opportunity and the prize that's up for grabs is one that you can't really ignore. And Daniel and Shai realized that, and that's what led them to insurance.
Brilliant, thank you. I went on and spoke. It was a marvelous conversation with Yale. Another anecdote from a clip is that once the incumbents woke up, it took a year or two, woke up to what was happening and how Lemonade was beginning to take real market share. They began introducing similar-ish type concepts themselves, and Yale talks about how lots of these came up, all of them apparently with other citrus-based names. Marvelous story. Julian, over to you now for If at First You Don't Succeed.
Thank you, Jeff. So If at First You Don't Succeed, it's similar in some ways to the George Bernard Shaw Unreasonable Person Award, but the difference is that this is people who never give up, and it doesn't matter if they have to try doing things a different way. They just keep on going, and eventually success follows. You see in the slide the 5 finalists for this category this year. Congratulations to all of them. The People's Choice winner this year, the one voted by you, the public, is to Field Intelligence for the pharma tech platform that enables provision of quality medicines and microcredit to almost 500,000 patients in Nigeria. And the Judge's Choice winner is Arth, who deserve this award in so many ways. Many of you have never heard of Arth. You are going to find out something fascinating about this company before we bring one of the founders in to discuss it with you. Determined to help tackle India's huge problem of deforestation and air pollution, a team of students from the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi decided to use cow dung logs for cremation. Yes, you heard that right. Not trees, cow dung logs. Now, the trouble is that dung is wet, so the team built a huge greenhouse to dry it. But drying needs heat and wind, and there's no wind inside a greenhouse. Changing strategy, they then turned to using LPG heaters with fans. But this conflicted with their clean energy mission. Finally, they turned to biomass to power the heaters, and in so doing, they reduced log drying time from 8 days down to 2. And today, their manufacturing hub supplies cow dung logs in bulk to the largest crematorium in Delhi. In 3 years' time, it won't just have saved 2.3 million tons of carbon dioxide and 4,500 tons of methane, but it will have generated around £4 million worth of wages for the local economy and significantly impacted pollution by disposing of cow dung more hygienically and efficiently. So a great story. Joining us to discuss it briefly is Ayush Sultania, one of the managers of the project. Welcome, Ayush.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian and Jeff, for giving an opportunity to be here at Real Innovation Award.
Perfect.
So,
I've got a couple of questions for you, and I want to start with just where the idea came from. I mean, what gave you the crazy idea of using cow dung instead of wood for cremations?
Yeah, so actually in India, the cow dung is considered to be sacred. Okay, so we were reading about how we can contribute towards decreasing the deforestation and also decreasing towards increase of pollution. So we came to know that 5% of the pollution is directly contributed by the cremations of the body in India. So the same way, we manufactured cow dung logs that was at a similar shape and size of wood, so that can be used for the cremations. So this is the idea that we have encountered. Yeah.
And how on earth did you sort of test it out? In other words, it's a great idea, but how did you manage to persuade? How did you know that people would actually buy into it?
Yeah, so this is really very interesting story. So actually, we manufactured it, but the main challenge was, will it be easily acceptable by the public or not? So what we have done is we have planned a campaign, Last Right Done Right. Okay, and we sent the entire team to metro stations, near to railway stations, to the public places, and there we started taking feedback from the people where we are manufacturing this. Would you be interested in doing getting cremated for your loved ones or not? So the response was really like we were really happy with the response, and we were joyed, and then we launched the product, and then and today we are here with you.
Perfect. And as I mentioned in the introduction there, you tried 3 or 4 different ways of actually just drying the cow dung out. Anything else you'd like to add to that before we close? Just in terms of the tenacity that you showed?
Yeah, actually we initially manufactured cow dung drying system, because cow dung is it has 70 to 80% of moisture in it. So the main problem was to dry the cow dung. Okay. And India is a country where we have all the seasons. It's winter, it's rainy, spring, all the seasons are there. So obviously in summer we don't need any drying system, but for winters and rainy season we needed it. So initially we manufactured a drying system, but somehow it failed. So then at the rainy season, and it was at the peak of our launch of the product, and we had no drying system now. So what we have done, then we again manufactured with the next technology to implement it. So somehow it was manageable, but it was not giving that amount of efficiency along with the cost. So then again, the third time we again improved it, and now we are running it very successfully.
Well, indeed. If at first you don't succeed is indeed the right motto for you as a business. So thank you. And we wish again you every success in terms of growing this. Jeff, over to you for the final category.
Thanks very much, Julian. So this is the Innovation in Adversity Award. Now, this year is what future historians might well come to call the year of COVID. We introduced a new category for the Real Innovation Awards called Innovation in Adversity. They say that necessity is a mother of invention, and it's fascinating to see just how much innovation has happened this year. From hand sanitizers, fairly trivial example, to vaccines, far less trivial, and then entirely new behaviors and ways of working. We asked 4 of our faculty colleagues here at London Business School, we asked them that direct question: why is it, do they think, that we see so much innovation in adversity? We're going to show a few clips of their responses. You'll see it's taken from a much larger interview, which you can see, but let's hear what they said.
Some of the most inspiring approaches I've seen have been grassroots, bottom up, user-generated innovation. And it's really about adoption of innovation rather than necessarily innovation that involves substantial invention. It is about adoption of new ways of doing things in places that have not seen much change and in sectors that have not seen much change for decades, sometimes centuries.
When in thinking about how adversity stimulates innovation, we want to be very mindful of the role of uncertainty. When were you most impacted by uncertainty? The day before learning about COVID or the day after learning about it? Uncertainty looms high prior to disruption happening. And what you want to be mindful of is how to prepare for such eventuality.
I think that adversity makes all of us feel a little bit scared at the beginning. And of course, the first reaction is not positive. We just want to be at home and, be protected somehow. But I think the question is whether you want to stay like that or, even worse, because things will not solve by itself, or there is something we can do about it. And some people, when they think about that, they say, yeah, there is something I can do about it. And the question is now, do I want to do it?
So what should you do to succeed through innovation, and how can an established firm think about ways to productively look forward? I'd say that there are 3 important Re's that they have to do. You have to reassess where the value opportunities lie, thinking about where the options for growth are, something that sometimes we're able to do. You have to reconfigure your business model, think about how you digitize, how you embed yourself in these new platforms and ecosystems, think about how you change the way you connect with other players, and most importantly, how you reallocate capital and energy in the firm. The big problem that we see in organizations is that they don't have the courage and the impetus to look coldly and boldly at how they shift their capital, their people, and their resources. What we do know is that those that do it, and those that don't only batten the hatches, cutting CapEx and R&D and costs, but that focus on cost cutting while they identify drivers of growth and critically reallocate resources and possibly entirely stop areas that will not be valuable in the future, are the ones who will be able to be successful a couple of years later.
For me, it's just do it, right? If there is an opportunity, if you don't do it, somebody else is gonna do it. And the only thing you need is to be agile and be willing to take risks, like startups and entrepreneurs do. So you can have entrepreneurs in your company. So let them take risks. Don't stop the people that have great ideas, and assume that some of these initiatives are gonna fail. Then you learn. There's no problem of failing.
And what I would say is embrace the opportunity to think of resilience. Adopt a scenario business planning. And rather than taking on a tunnel vision, looking at the one scenario that is most likely, whether with or without disruption, think about the fact that no one knows what the future holds. And how do you build resilience across as many possible scenarios as you can?
Marvelous. Oh, incidentally, I mean, Julian and I have had a marvelous time talking to the various winners and faculty colleagues, and we only show tiny clips of some of the videos. You can see the extended version, the unabridged version on the website from faculty colleagues. Marvelous. Okay, so back to the Innovation University category. The judges had 5 interesting and very different companies to choose from. Here they are. They're the finalists, and it's very fitting that we have a unanimous winner for both people's and judges' choice in this category. And it's the team from Warrington and Halton Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust, who invented in record time the black box to treat COVID-19. Sometimes innovation comes from a pure eureka light bulb moment. At other times, sheer necessity is a mother to invention. This was certainly the case for the team, who modified the existing CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure machines, to treat sleep disorders, and then use them to replace the ventilators in use elsewhere in other hospitals as a first resort for treating COVID patients. Now, being more readily available and less intrusive than ventilators, the Warrington and Halton machines work so well that the region has the lowest COVID-19 mortality rate in the northwest of England. So, let's hear from the team that came up with this wonderful invention. We're going to have a conversation with them, and we're joined by the two leads at Warrington and Halton Teaching Hospital Trust, Dr. Alex Crowe, Medical Director, and Mithan Murthy, Consultant Respiratory Physician and Respiratory Lead, Specialty Lead. Alex, Mithan, welcome, and I think we should be joined by Julian as well. Otherwise, I'm going to be a bit lonely up here. So fantastic that you can all join, all of us with these marvelous backgrounds as well. Alex, let's get this into context. Back in March, COVID had hit in other regions, and at Warrington, you're expecting the tsunami, what, within weeks?
Yes, absolutely. That's the short version of it, for sure, yeah. I think that we were aware that it was on its way, and this gave us an opportunity to provide some planning, which included training and reorganizing our hospitals in order to accommodate the demand and capacity that we were modeling with the information that we had to date. And that was something that changed on a week-by-week basis.
So that was top-down planning, and Mithan, this was bottom-up as well as top-down. Tell us where the inspiration came from, the technology itself, the CPAP machine. But the machine itself wasn't new, but using the machine as a substitute for ventilators certainly was. How and when did the penny drop?
Thanks for inviting us here. So I think just to give background, the machines were there, as you said, treating an existing medical condition, sleep apnea. I run a sleep clinic. I've used those machines and very familiar with them, and so were the other members of my team. But also a more fancy version of that machine also already exists, also called CPAP, which is present in intensive care units all over the world, and they are used, these more fancy CPAP machines are used to treat diseases like COVID, and we've had pandemics previously as well, where people have been treated with similar machines, with the more technologically advanced CPAP machines. The problem at the start of the pandemic was that everybody wanted more of those, and just as we heard in the news, there was worldwide shortages of actual ventilators. There were also significant shortages of the fancy, all singing, on dancing CPAP machines. And we just simply could not procure anymore from the modeling that we did of how much demand we'll have.
So you essentially, the innovation was, let's take the simpler ones and make them fit for purpose.
Exactly. That's where, and the theory and the sort of thought process behind it was that we have something that works. We have something that works in similar situations. We have loads of them. So why not be brave and try it? Although it's not been tried before, and that's what we did.
Julian, I guess this scenario isn't that unusual. I mean, you clearly have senior management, Alex, here, expecting a crisis, and those at the coalface with a credible solution. I guess that's where most of the time things get stuck, because there's no mechanisms or protocol for the top-down and bottom-up to engage with each other.
Well, that's right. And of course, it is actually a curious fact, perhaps it's not so curious after this conversation, that you actually do see much more innovation in crisis situations. And of course, that's driven by two very, very different things. On the one hand, we've got this sort of necessity to innovate. We've got literally a problem staring us in the face, which we've got to find a way around. And as soon as you see a problem, it's human ingenuity allows you to come up with kind of thoughts around how to overcome it. But then you've also got the usual problem of innovation is that there's obstacles. There's people saying, well, we haven't got the resources, we haven't got the time, we've got other priorities. And suddenly in a crisis, all of that stuff falls away. And you've got usually a very clear unity of purpose. We know what we're trying to do. Everybody buys into it. And all the usual arguments about processes and routines and objections, get suppressed almost immediately. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear Alex and Mithan's view on this, but certainly my experience as a generalized observation, it's in some ways, it's actually easier to innovate in a crisis situation.
Well, Alex, let's ask two experienced clinical leads approaching you with an entirely new clinical pathway from scratch based on judgment as much as evidence. And worse still, they're seeking new money and permission to go out on a limb. For you, it can't have been too comfortable a place to be, to have to approve that.
I think what was important about behaviours and the pandemic was the focused attention, which I think Julian refers to. And so all of the clinicians at Warrington and Halton very much got into a mindset of clinical discussions and understanding the patient groups that might be coming into the hospital and how we were going to look after those patients in the best way that we could. And that really did focus attention. And from a clinician's perspective, my interpretation was that that was a very engaging conversation because it was very focused to medical information. And as a result of that, Mithun and his colleagues in critical care came together and had a very synergistic discussion about how to proceed at pace.
Mm. So, Mithun, how did it feel for you? I mean, once upon a time, clinical leads, when I was a boy, would have routinely had autonomy, but nowadays much more hidebound by established protocols and clinical pathways. How easy did you find it to be able to overturn, I mean, that kind of inertia? I think in earlier conversation we called it bureaucracy.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that does highlight what happens in the cold front of a pandemic. I mean, we are faced with this. So, but it also highlights how not just the clinicians respond to it. So we know our own areas of specialist interest. So we bring up whatever we know best to the table. But also senior management bring what they would suggest as enablers and so forums that where we could actually innovate and exchange ideas, and also some of this the associate services to use them as enablers for quick turnarounds rather than in the usual sense of the word sort of either obstacles or sort of just things that slow down the process. So that did definitely happen at Warrington at the start of the pandemic, that all the other support services for want of a better word played ball essentially. So it really helped. And I think, from like I said, from this very start, it was a small idea to use the CPAP that we existing had. We then had to, as Julian's pointed out, sometimes it's easier in a pandemic, but we still had to prove that what we thought would work. And that's where some of my colleagues, one of my colleagues, Dr. Sagar Patel, he had a lot of experience of the machines himself as well. So we put together the kit. We added the innovative bits to it. The things that would make them be able to be used in the acute patients, which is not their usual use. And then we had to test it, and then Saga helped test it on some staff members first, who sort of very kindly agreed to be guinea pigs. Yeah, and then we found some really astonishing initial results, and that was encouraging. And it was with those initial encouraging results that we then went to Alex and went to everybody else to say, look, this is something that might just work.
Okay, so you had the autonomy to do the experiments, and that provided the evidence. Julian, I mean, we've singled out Warrington for this award, which must mean it's remarkable, not just amongst organisations, but amongst hospitals. From what you're hearing, what is special that's going on here?
Yeah, I think, look, it's special because it's both innovative in terms of a technical solution, albeit not hugely innovative, but innovative in terms of almost like the politics or the behaviors or organizations of a big organization. And, hospitals, of course, medical services have all sorts of specializations and silos and rules and procedures there's regulatory approvals. All of those things mean that moving quickly in a hospital situation, of course, is difficult. And so for me, there's a technical part of this story, but really it's actually a story of leadership and behavior change. And, you know, you kind of zoom out from the specifics of this case. It is fascinating to observe over this last 9 months just how many other organizations have also been very innovative in this period in terms of not just coming up with solutions that work in the COVID situation, but actually entirely new solutions to whatever business problems that they are working with, because we suddenly can't actually be face to face with each other anymore.
Mm. I mean, did it feel for you, Alex, and you, Mithan, you know, worrying from that coalface? I mean, eventually COVID hit, and you were having to make these life and death decisions, which were unconventional because everywhere else they were going on to ventilators. And here you were both authorizing and practicing the use of CPAP machines. There's no safe harbors here. How did it feel at that early stage?
Well, sorry, Alex, if you want.
I was just going to say, I think it goes back to something that Mithan mentioned earlier, which is we very much saw the corporate services becoming the enablers. And I mentioned about the importance of the clinical discussions amongst healthcare professionals. But the corporate service, such as digital, HR, finance, were very supportive in order to facilitate the progress that was required to adhere to such pace and response.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I was going to mention was the fact that it was also, you mentioned that is in terms of the caution aspect of it, and, you know, this is something new, and would it work? So what we were finding that at the start of beginning of March, so the Northwest was maybe a couple of weeks behind London, and we were getting news from Italy, for example, in January and February about what was happening there to COVID patients. And I think very quickly processing that clinical information with my critical care colleagues, and one of my close colleagues, Dr. Mark Forrest, we realized that actually speaking, what a lot of the other places were doing, the evidence that was coming through was that ventilators were not actually good news for COVID patients. So ironically, we were almost at a point where actually you start to think that anything is better than that, I think, because the data that was coming through from Italy was actually pretty bad at that time, and London as well. So I think that's where it gave us the impetus to say, well, why don't we try this? That we know this works, and the alternative really isn't a good enough alternative.
And we'll come in a minute. I'd like to ask both of you almost as an end, what was the impact of this? Because you've obviously had follow-ups and done some comparisons. But there's also a danger in all of this, which is when the crisis is over, you go back to business as usual. I mean, Julian, that can, you know, I wonder what 2020, we're going to have the vaccine, but who are going to be back to normal? Do you think organization, I mean, what does that, putting on your consultant's hat, what does this organization have to do to retain some of that spirit and continue to innovate?
And I've had these conversations with many companies in many different sectors. In other words, you know, look at what we've achieved in this last 6 months in terms of, you know, dramatically changing our product offering, our internal way of working. How can we continue to sort of, you know, tap into that enthusiasm and this new way of working? And there's no magic solution here, of course. Clearly, we can use this as evidence of what is being done. And for the next couple of years, we can keep going back to this and saying, this is how we worked during the crisis, let's do more of it. But it does also put an onus on leaders to provide the inspiration, if you like, for the opportunities that come along, because we don't want to manufacture bad crises, of course we don't, but we can create what you might almost call positive crises. In other words, inspirational opportunities. We can say, this is what we are trying to do, and make it sufficiently exciting that also in its own way mobilizes people to work together in new ways. And it is a fascinating fact that you can look back to previous crises, and very often very successful companies were created during them. The global financial crisis we had both WhatsApp and Airbnb, and indeed several other companies were created during that crisis.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it becomes part of the legend, the myth, the story of the organization that can always be referred back to.
Exactly.
Alex, Mithan, one of you, maybe both of you, what's been the impact of this? I mean, as I said, you can innovate away, but in this case, the impact really is life and death. What have you done in terms of measuring in however you measure? Alex or Mithan, I don't mind. You must both be glorying in these figures.
Just yes, I mean the impact obviously was the clinical impact of it during the first wave, and as you mentioned, it is hard to say a complete direct causative relationship, of course, without doing a lot more stuff on it. But actually, I think it's not just as Julian was saying, not just the technical impact of the black box itself. I know patients actually tolerated that very well. And in fact, at one point, Mark actually said to me that he almost felt like the patients tolerated the black box, the simpler machines, much better than some of the more complicated ones. So one thing is that the clinical impact was truly there that we saw. But the other thing was also the organizational impact, so that we never were in a position, because of this innovation, that we had to make any sorts of uncomfortable decisions that everybody, all doctors were thinking at the start of the pandemic that they might have to make, and we never were in that position. We avoided getting overwhelmed in a lot of respects because of both because of the actual technical innovation, but also because of the pathways that we developed with intensive care, with critical care, and we maintain the flow of patients both up to critical care and then back down into respiratory. So all of those things, the SOPs, the pathways, all of that helped us not to get overwhelmed. So I think the organizational impact was much higher.
Save the NHS. And
yeah, Jeff, thanks. A couple of things really. One is at a patient level. I think that what the intervention mirrored what nationally was found was that the use of CPAP was of beneficial consequence for prognosis as far as treatment is concerned compared to mechanical ventilation. And so that is concurrent with national conclusions. I think at an organizational level, we've changed, so the clinical discussions are being nurtured. And so we have a medical cabinet which meets now once every week. And we have clinicians that attend with an agenda which is purely clinical discussions. And we find that immensely useful in order to feed into some of the other forums so that we are clear as clinicians what it is, what our expectations are with an intervention or a work stream.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think we're almost there now. Julian, any last words? I mean, we saw this and we loved it. Great and a worthy winner. So pleased that the people chose that as well they should. But fantastic to be able to talk to you both. And I think there's a good teaching case study in here somewhere. But anyway, that's for another day. So Alex, Mithan, thank you so much, and back to you now, Julian, for the finals.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much wraps up our award ceremony for this year. So just a few thank yous. First of all, to anybody who was nominated, anybody who did any nominating, all of our judges, everybody who helped with the shortlisting. I'd also like to briefly thank the team behind the scenes who did all the hard work here. I'm just going to call out one person, Eva Negruzzi, who did.
Goodness, how she coped with us, I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, lots of people helped, but she clearly more than anybody else did. So thank you, Eva. You did a terrific job. One more time, you're welcome to go to our website to see all the materials about the awards and watch all the videos if you're interested. Please use that hashtag Real Innovation Awards to share your thoughts. We are going to close now, but before we go, and I want to make sure that all of the award winners who are here today have a chance to turn on their cameras so that we can take a picture of everybody. So thank you all, and we will close this thing down now, and we will stay in touch via the website. And please keep on innovating, and wish you every bit of success.